While it is currently the third most powerful army in the world, China aims to take first place from the United States, its major rival. To achieve this, since its rise as a global power, Beijing has consistently strengthened its military arsenal, sparking debates and concerns about its true objectives. This rise in power is closely tied to its thousand-year-old history and contemporary ambitions on the international stage. That's why in this video, we invite you to take a closer look at China's military and nuclear arsenal, its military objectives, and its growing diplomatic influence. Let's dive in. China has become an important global power thanks to a series of strategic economic and political reforms. It's important to know that in the mid-20th century, Beijing was still an isolated and economically weak country. In 1949, the Communist Party took power in China. While the Cold War was ongoing, the country was mainly supported by the USSR and was even quite dependent on it. In fact, a treaty of friendship, alliance, and mutual assistance was signed with the Soviet Union, along with economic and territorial agreements. At this time, China was very poor, had poor diplomatic relations, and no trading partners. Two events then marked the country's history. The first was the Great Leap Forward, an economic policy launched by Mao Zedong and implemented from 1958 to 1960. The goal was to rapidly stimulate production through the collectivization of agriculture, expansion of industrial infrastructure, and large-scale public works projects. However, this program proved unrealistic and further weakened the country's economy. The second event was the Cultural Revolution, which took place from 1966 to 1976, also led by Mao Zedong in an effort to consolidate his power by relying on the country's youth. However, this period of chaos brought China to the brink of civil war. But Mao's death in September 1976 changed many things. Deng Xiaoping took power, marking a clear break from his predecessor. He introduced a series of economic and social reforms. The political system also changed, becoming authoritarian rather than totalitarian. Led by a single party, the Chinese Communist Party, this political regime allowed for economic development and international power growth. The government is often criticized for human rights violations, including controlling information, using propaganda and censorship, and repressing minorities. However, the new policies allowed the economy to liberalize, and Beijing opened up to the world. The country was able to capitalize on the acceleration of economic globalization and its accession to the World Trade Organization in 2001. Between the late 1970s and mid-2010s, China made economic development a top priority. In just 40 years, Beijing made a spectacular rise and became the world's factory and the largest market in many sectors. However, its economy was abruptly halted by the coronavirus crisis. Since then, China's economic recovery seems to be losing steam. In fact, for the first time in 2022, the country recorded growth of less than 3%, the lowest it had been since 1979, except for the year of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is therefore clear that China is struggling to regain its momentum. What about its military and nuclear arsenal? With the goal of building the most powerful army in the world by 2049, the centenary of the founding of the People's Republic of China, over the years, the Middle Kingdom has become a leading military power. Air, land, sea, and cyber, all military branches are undergoing modernization. It is, in fact, first in terms of available manpower and also has the largest naval fleet, consisting of 370 ships. And Beijing is doing everything to make it even more powerful. For instance, in 2022 alone, the Chinese naval forces added 3 Type 055 cruisers of over 11,000 tons, armed with 112 vertical launch silos, and 3 Type 052D mod anti-aircraft destroyers of over 7,000 tons, each armed with 64 silos. We also saw the arrival of a Type 075 helicopter carrier of 40,000 tons and 3 Type 039B Yuan-class submarines. Additionally, the Chinese Navy currently operates 6 nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines of Type 094 and 6 nuclear-powered attack submarines, including 3 Type 093 Xiang-class and as many Type 093A Xiang-2. Furthermore, the first 2 nuclear-powered cruise missile submarines, Type 093B Xiang-3, were launched between May 2022 and January 2023. At this rate, by 2025, the Chinese Navy is expected to have 395 ships and then 435 by 2030. Land and air capabilities have also been strengthened. For example, China's army is the largest permanent land force in the world, with 915,000 active duty soldiers, nearly double the 486,000 US soldiers. According to Forbes, China also has 5,800 tanks, with the most famous being the Type 99, the most modern tank in service in the Chinese Army. In terms of the Air Force, there are over 2,800 aircraft, about 2,500 of which are combat-ready. China's most advanced stealth fighter is the Jade-20, designed to compete with the US F-22. The weapons and technologies in the air fleet are also formidable assets for Beijing. The country is also working on new bombers, such as the Xi'an H-20, which should be revealed soon. China is also the second largest arms manufacturer in the world, behind the United States and ahead of Russia. It is also the fifth largest arms exporter. While 10 years ago, it still relied heavily on arms imports from Russia and Ukraine, it is now fully self-sufficient. Currently, the majority of Chinese arms sold every year, valued at around $70 to $80 billion, are actually acquired by the different branches of the Chinese military. It's worth noting that China is not a non-signatory country to the Arms Trade Treaty adopted by the UN in 2013 to regulate arms trade. Let's also talk about China's military investments, which have never been higher. The military budget for 2024 will increase by 7.2%, the same rate as in 2023. China plans to spend 1.665 trillion yuan, about $231.4 billion, on defense, which remains more than 3 times less than the US military budget in this domain. The country allocates 1.6% of its GDP to its military, much less than the US at 3.5% or Russia at 4.1%, according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. Already surpassing the US in several military domains, China is likely to become, in a few years, its main military adversary. Now, let's talk about nuclear capabilities. By the end of 2023, China's nuclear arsenal began to truly worry the United States. In fact, at that time, a report from a US Department of Defense was published, highlighting that China is accelerating the development of its nuclear arsenal at a faster pace than previously estimated. By May 2023, China was believed to have over 500 operational nuclear warheads. This number could reach 1,000 by 2030 and 1,500 by 2035, far exceeding the previous prediction made by Washington in 2020, which estimated China's military would have 600 atomic bombs by 2030. The report also highlights that Beijing is aiming to build intercontinental ballistic missile launch facilities. In total, China is believed to have over 300 silos, which will house DF-41 missiles capable of striking targets over 10,000 kilometers away, as well as DF-31AG missiles with a range of 14,000 kilometers. Both types of missiles are equipped with nuclear warheads. But what truly alarms Washington isn't necessarily the number of missiles or warheads. In fact, numbers alone don't tell the whole story, and corruption within the army isn't uncommon. Recent corruption scandals have raised doubts about the effectiveness of its missile forces and the professionalism of the military. For example, in 2023, several high-ranking Chinese military officials were dismissed. Among the issues highlighted were missiles filled with water instead of fuel, and faulty missile silos that could cause engine launches. These incidents have raised concerns about how the Chinese leadership perceives the country's military capabilities. Additionally, Chinese troops have not been battle-tested for decades, nor has their equipment. What the Russians are currently facing against the Ukrainians could make China's leadership reconsider. However, China's underground network is a serious concern for Washington. To transport its devastating weapons, China has built a gigantic underground network that spans the entire country. It is 5,000 kilometers long and 1,000 meters deep, and its construction began in 1995. This allows China to move its nuclear arsenal to various strategic points while staying hidden from American spy satellites. These new developments would allow China to respond to a nuclear attack on its soil, even if its top command centers were destroyed. This is a real issue for the US, which previously had enough nuclear missiles to destroy all Chinese silos and command centers and avoid any nuclear retaliation on American soil. That is no longer the case today with this underground system, which makes locating China's nuclear weapons almost impossible. The speed of development of China's military and nuclear arsenal is therefore truly impressive. Among its most dangerous weapons is a new orbital missile with nuclear capabilities, housing a hypersonic glider that was tested during the summer of 2021. It would have circled the globe before crashing into the South China Sea, about 30 kilometers from its target. This type of weapon, hypersonic, is unique in that it flies much closer to Earth than traditional intercontinental missiles, making it harder to detect by radar. China also boasts two formidable aircraft carriers, the CNS Liaoning, which entered service in 2012. This Soviet-era Kuznetsov-class carrier has been modified, and the second is the CNS Shandong, which arrived in 2019 and is the first such vessel to be built by China itself. The flight decks of both carriers are equipped with a ski jump ramp to launch JAB-15 fighters, also known as flying sharks, and an arrestor wire to recover them. But that's not all. In June 2022, a third aircraft carrier, 100% Chinese, was launched, the CNS Fujian, belonging to the Type 003 class. Unlike the other two, it features electromagnetic catapults that allow for quicker takeoffs of stealth fighters and combat drones. The advantage of this technology lies in the fuel saved after takeoff, which increases the operational range of military aircraft. In contrast, the older carriers use ramps for takeoff, which also limits the number of aircraft that can be maintained on the flight deck. Additionally, the Fujian can carry more fuel and ammunition. It will also be capable of launching drones like the Chengdu Wing Long 2. This drone can conduct long-endurance flights, covering distances of over 1,000 kilometers. Its ability to stay airborne for extended periods is valuable for gathering intelligence for ground troops or naval forces, and it can even destroy key targets when necessary. Of course, China's military arsenal goes far beyond just aircraft carriers, including bombers, drones, and hypersonic missiles like the DF-17. Now that you have an overview of the country's history and a better understanding of its military and nuclear arsenal, let's look at Beijing's ambitions. The Chinese government seeks to expand its influence globally. While the United States has long been dominant in various areas, China is now attempting to challenge that dominance. The pursuit of power and status has driven China to focus on its economic development and geopolitical influence. As a part of this strategy, China aims to expand its alliances by establishing strategic partnerships and investing in projects, making the growth of its military arsenal a key part of this strategy. In fact, the US has already stated that China is their primary strategic challenge, being the only rival with both the will and, increasingly, the capacity to alter the international order. Tensions between the two superpowers are rising. At the end of 2023, the US government accused China of engaging in intimidation tactics in the Asia-Pacific airspace. Chinese fighters had been performing risky maneuvers around American aircraft conducting operations or reconnaissance. U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for Asia, Eli Ratner, cited over 180 incidents between the fall of 2021 and 2023, a figure far greater than in the previous decade. On the other side of the world, in the Arctic, Russia has several Soviet-era bases that are being modernized and used to strengthen its ties with Beijing. Joint military exercises are periodically held between the two nations, and during one of them, a Chinese and Russian fleet was observed extending into U.S. waters off the Aleutian Islands near Beijing Island. Washington does not support these acts of intimidation. Despite this, the two countries have resumed dialogue with a series of high-level U.S. official visits to Beijing at the end of 2023. However, Washington remains frustrated that Beijing still refuses to facilitate direct communication at the highest level between their military hierarchies. In order to assert itself on the global stage, China has sought to create alliances, establish strategic partnerships, and invest in infrastructure projects. One major focus has been Africa. In 2013, China unveiled the Belt and Road Initiative, aiming to strengthen connectivity and economic cooperation with other countries. As a result, China has become an important partner in Africa, doing so in three ways: by becoming the leading trade partner, providing loans, and investing in infrastructure. This allows China to make profits by having Chinese companies handle construction, and sometimes even sending workers to carry out the projects. Once the infrastructure is complete, repayment occurs with interest. If a country is unable to repay in full, the balance may be settled in raw materials like oil or minerals, which are crucial for the functioning of Chinese businesses. For example, to ensure the production of electric car batteries, China secured an agreement with the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the world's leading cobalt producer. African nations also have the option to finance their own infrastructure projects, where China might take control of a railway it financed until the country can repay the loan. This arrangement can take years or even decades. China has done something similar with Sri Lanka's Hambantota port, which was built in 2015 using Chinese funding, but is now under Chinese ownership for the next 99 years after the country could not repay the loan. The same applies to Pakistan with the Gwadar port, which includes upscale residential complexes, shopping centers, and sports facilities primarily for the Chinese who constructed and managed the port. This not only strengthens ties with Pakistan, a common adversary of India, but also gives Beijing a direct outlet to the Indian Ocean. The acquisition of several ports worldwide allows China to expand its naval power. NATO's chief, Jens Stoltenberg, noted that China is getting closer to us and added, "We see it in Africa, in the Arctic, and trying to control critical infrastructure." Another reason for China's rapid development of its nuclear and military arsenal is its pressure on Taiwan. China considers Taiwan an integral part of its territory. When the Chinese nationalists lost the Civil War in 1949, Taiwan became an independent country, but China refuses to tolerate this and seeks reunification. The dispute is not just historical, but also because Taiwan occupies a strategic position in the East China Sea, protecting vital maritime routes from Chinese control. Controlling Taiwan would enhance China's position in the region and provide better access to the Pacific Ocean. However, to prevent U.S. intervention, Taiwan needs to quickly strengthen its military. In fact, a 2023 report by the Center for a New American Security revealed that the U.S. would be unable to assist Taiwan in a conflict with China, as the U.S. Navy would struggle to supply Taiwan with military equipment, and China would hold a significant advantage in numbers and logistics. Tensions have also arisen between China and the Philippines, as Beijing claims sovereignty over nearly the entire South China Sea, a claim contested by an international court ruling in 2016. Now the Philippines and the U.S. hold an annual joint naval exercise, Balikatan, which contributes to escalating tensions. Collisions between Chinese and Philippine vessels have become routine, alongside other provocations. Tensions have also flared between China and India over disputed territories in the Himalayas. The two nations are in conflict over Aksai Chin, an area located at an altitude of 4,200 meters, which has been under Chinese control since the military intervention of 1950. However, China does not have only adversaries, it has military ties with Russia, with both countries strengthening their cooperation. In 2023, China and Russia agreed to elevate their military and technical cooperation to a higher level. Initially, the two countries' officer academies and command branches will collaborate more closely. High-ranking officials hope to improve communication and cooperation for more effective joint military operations in conflicts involving the interests of both Beijing and Moscow. Other military services, like strategic missile forces, may also begin to exchange information. Russia has already announced its assistance to China in developing an early warning system. This is significant, as such technology is difficult to develop but critical for national defense. Historically, Russian-Chinese military cooperation has been relatively discreet, with the secrecy increasing as both countries have faced more direct confrontation with the United States. Currently, Russian media have identified only one contract linked to bilateral defense cooperation, a $60 million contract for the development of specialized software for missile defense systems. The involvement of Russian companies in the development of Chinese ballistic missile early warning systems provides China with access to valuable data on these systems. This reflects a high level of trust and raises the possibility of the integration of Russian and Chinese systems. If integrated, Russian stations could provide China with early warning data, and China could reciprocate by providing data from its own stations to Russia. This would allow the two nuclear powers to build their own global missile defense network. It is no secret that in recent decades, China has aimed to assert itself technologically. This ambition is impacting the country's military arsenal, as it is being used to strengthen China's technological edge. Technology also enables China to expand its influence and increase its revenues, which are reinvested into its military arsenal. In fact, concerns are growing about China's technological progress. Companies like Huawei, Alibaba, and Tencent have captured global markets, setting new standards in artificial intelligence, telecommunications, e-commerce, and more. According to a 2023 study by the Australian Economic Institute, China has become the global leader in 37 technological fields, including electric batteries, 5G, and synthetic biology. This puts China in a position to challenge the economic well-being of the US and Europe, as well as to threaten the global order. This is another worry for Washington, which has attempted to stimulate its own industries and restrict economic ties with China. This has been made possible by the Made in China 2025 plan, launched in 2015, which aims to boost the development and trade of high-tech goods in China. These products, which increase productivity, are now essential to China's future economic growth. As a result, China is now the world's leading exporter of high-tech goods targeted by this plan. The problem is that if this continues, many countries will find themselves in a position of economic dependence. Beijing wants to lead innovation in key sectors and dominate parts of the supply chain, as it has already done with lithium, for example. China also aims to become more independent from the rest of the world, especially the US. To this end, the country recently made headlines for constructing the largest hole in its history, aimed at accessing a substantial amount of raw materials. Furthermore, after massive investments in wind farms, enormous wind turbines have recently caught the world's attention. China, due to its vast size, is combining solar, hydroelectric, and offshore wind farms to move away from coal, which fueled its growth for decades. As of now, China leads in areas such as intermediate computer products, new energy, and advanced railways, exemplified by its new Hyperloop train, which aims to revolutionize high-speed transport. However, the US remains the leader in the development of key emerging technologies, as well as in intellectual leadership, particularly in artificial intelligence. The Chinese government has also set several ambitious scientific goals, such as Deep Earth, studying geological nature and evolution, Deep Sea, ocean exploration, Deep Blue, developing information technologies, and Deep Space, space exploration. However, some experts argue that China's growth has mainly been a catch-up process, and without greater freedom and openness, China may struggle to become a true innovation-driven economy and technological leader, a prospect that reassures the US. It is clear that China's military and nuclear growth, as well as its economic and technological expansion, are extraordinary. While the Middle Kingdom continues to strengthen its military and nuclear arsenal, and its diplomatic ties with other countries, the question remains, will it become the world's leading military power? While it's true that Beijing is growing more powerful, it still falls behind the United States both militarily and technologically. However, this does not change the fact that China is a country to keep an eye on. As a real global power, its strategic ambitions and economic and diplomatic expansionism continue to shape the geopolitical landscape. With increasing tensions, especially with the US and its allies, frictions are being felt from the South China Sea to Africa and the Arctic. It is therefore clear that Beijing could disrupt the global order.